I'm here at RC21. This focus at RC21 on transgressive cities really fits my interests, which are focused on global 7 cities and 7 urbanism. They're focused on political practices and everyday urban geographies, how ordinary people make the city. And I'm really interested in thinking about how organized movements and citizens in their everyday, ordinary ways of living in cities both challenge and rework state projects for development. So that's my broad overview. My talk today is focused on waiting and the politics of waiting as a majority experience for many people in 7 cities. Waiting for housing, waiting for better schooling, waiting for safer cities, waiting in some sort of way for a better life. Of course, people aren't just waiting, they're doing all sorts of things in the meanwhile. And that's really what I've been focusing on in my research. What are the modalities of waiting? How do people wait? So in the case of housing, in backyard shacks in South African cities, in informal settlements, in overcrowded rental housing, in utter homelessness on the streets, in fields, and so on. And I'm really interested in how that waiting, that living precariously in the meanwhile, engages and challenges the state projects to deliver housing, state projects to deliver development. So in what waiting looks like, that it's passive, it's actually not. It's both mundane and profound, shaping everyday life in everyday ways, but also in long-term ways. It's visible and it's invisible. It's legal and it's illegal. It's precarious and it's a sustainable way of remaking the city in ways that work for ordinary people. So this for me is a really interesting mix of empirical questions which help us think about states and rights that citizens have, projects for the state, how they get rolled out in policy and in legal frameworks and in bureaucracies, but also in how ordinary people, in their emotional attachments to development, to state projects, to their hopes, their aspirations for the future, and in their political everyday lives, how they remake those projects. And conceptually, this is really interesting too. It challenges us to think about temporalities on the short term and the long term, in ways in which new governments come into power, in the ways in which people live across generations and families, in the way that people live on a day-to-day basis. These are complex temporalities that social science is challenged to think about. It also helps us think about spatialities, how the city in its inequalities and its divisions and its segregation, very important elements of how we think about South African and Southern African cities, how they're being remade, both entrenched in problematic ways, but also recrafted, remade, made into livable spaces in some instances. So this is the mix of work that I'm interested in doing. It situates waiting not as something passive, but as something between a way of understanding the city as a project of governance, as a project of states making it better, or between mobilization and resistance, individual citizens' movements challenging the state. It sits somewhere in that mix and between it, and is really a provocative and quite paradoxical entry to think about, where citizens are claiming rights, making themselves visible, but having to live subversively and often illegally in the meanwhile.